Welcome, listeners. You're listening to Deeds in the Desert, where real estate investors tune in for the latest news.
Welcome back to Deeds in the Desert. Today, we're going to introduce somebody that's been behind the scenes for a few months now that we are ready to introduce to you. And I know it may seem a little scary that we have maybe hired a chief legal officer, but there's a benefit to all of our investors for doing this. So welcome, John, to the team.
Thank you.
What is going on?
What is going on? No, it's great to be here. It's great to be with Ignite Funding.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me here to talk.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
We have a little history. We knew each other before the hire. You had worked with us on a court case back in 2011, 2012. Right. And let's just say I've been acting as the legal liaison since then. And I am ready to pass that guard to you and have over the last couple of months. So wanted to just kind of introduce you to our investors and help them understand why you're here.
Okay.
And so walk me through that a little bit. Like, what was Carrie doing that you're now doing and probably more suited and well suited for than I was? But give us a little bit of an idea of what your role is here.
Okay. Well, yeah, among the many hats that you wear, as I always mention, was the lawyer hat. And it's not an easy hat to wear. And it's, a team effort as well. Mm-hmm. But, with any organization, as you grow, I think it's kind of a difficult decision that I've seen many clients have to make is, do we actually need a full-time in-house attorney? Yeah. And if we did, what would they do? Would it be, duplicative of maybe stuff we're already doing, or is it cheaper just to continue using outside counsel? But I think ultimately what it comes down to is, once a company gets big enough, mm-hmm. there's just things that come up on a day-to-day basis that you may not even realize that having someone dedicated to the legal aspect of the company mm-hmm. would be beneficial for you, for the investors, for your customers. So, first and foremost, you have someone in-house that's sitting here every day.
That's
and
nice.
Yeah, right. And if something comes up that, even if you don't think it requires legal expertise, having someone that has that training, that knowledge, that background, and then the experience of always looking at things from a legal standpoint, mm-hmm. I think by now, hopefully you agree, it's just invaluable to have, because it just takes a little bit of pressure off of you, so that you can focus on the things that you're best suited for, or that come up in your role, mm-hmm. instead of having to, again, it's like just one less hat that you have to wear all the time.
Absolutely. And I honestly didn't realize until we brought you in-house how much I was on a day-to-day basis spending on making those legal decisions, or talking with legal counsel in different states that we have, or engaging, because keep in mind, I run multiple companies. So it wasn't just a one-trick pony. I mean, you're here to help all of the companies that we have. And so the job doubles and triples at times. And so, it has become apparent to me, having you here, how much time I now have to focus on other things. And so that was eye-opening for me as well, because we had always had outside counsel. And we still will, obviously.
Of course,
we'll continue to have outside counsel, which I think some people are like, well, why would you have outside counsel, Carrie? You can save us so much money as investors by having in-house counsel. What does it mean from an investor standpoint? Because I think that may be... and maybe I didn't describe it well enough, so I'll allow you to. Okay. But you always need to have outside counsel. So explain that to us a little bit, because your role is really cost savings, but still maintaining that liaison with them.
Right. And I guess to go back to your original question on, my day-to-day role, or what is my role within the company and the companies, one of the big roles that I've been spending a lot of time on already is working with outside counsel and being the point person. That frees up you, it frees up Pat, mm-hmm. Misty, others on the team from having to step outside of their normal role to try to deal with attorneys, right?
Yes. I know them well.
I used to joke, I've been practicing law for 20 years now, almost, going one more year, and I hit the 20 mark.
Oh boy.
But I have always said over the time that the worst part about being an attorney is that you have to deal with attorneys all day, right? You're always talking to attorneys, and
Yes.
no one really wants to have to talk to an attorney. So, I mean, I joke with that, but it really, though,
very
from a
time-consuming.
business standpoint,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you don't want to have to step out of your normal day-to-day functions and focused on what you're doing to bring revenue in and to manage everything that you manage, to have to stop and deal with counsel.
Absolutely.
So having someone in-house that does that, and especially someone that brings that wealth of experience that I bring to the table here, that's going to make that is a big benefit, I would think, for the investors, because you have someone that's minding and watching these cases, that's their full-time job.
Yes, and watching every piece of the case, because it's important. When you have a big case that involves multiple parties, you have to make sure that your interests are never jeopardized in any way. And it could be through somebody else making a comment relatable to the project that could affect your assets. Yeah. And so you got to stay on top of everything.
And it's not only, just the time aspect of it, kind of what we're talking about, but I think because you're staying on top of it, you're looking at everything, but you have someone looking at it that has the background that I have, and that, kind of knows the inside baseball behind what it is exactly the lawyers are doing. They don't need to explain to me what this motion is that they're filing and why and what the strategy is. So a non-lawyer will see things like that, sometimes from their perspective, and add things that a lawyer wouldn't see.
Yes.
So it's good that we're going to, of course, continue to work hand in hand with a lot of this stuff. But having someone looking at it and working with outside counsel and following along and giving input to counsel that has the legal background and can understand what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and then also can direct outside counsel in a way that's hopefully going to add value and be more efficient overall. Because I've already had a couple opportunities to say, okay, let's not go down this path. Let's focus on this, because I know from my experience in being a trial attorney and going to court and fighting these battles in the courtroom, what a good spend is, I guess, from our standpoint. When we're spending investors' money to fight these battles for them, you don't want to waste any money.
No.
And legal bills are expensive enough as it is.
They are.
To be spending it on things that really have a very low probability of moving the needle on the ultimate outcome. That's what I'm trying to focus on. Is, if we're going to be spending time and resources on some of these legal cases where we have to, unfortunately, let's make sure that money is spent very wisely, because again, it's not our money. It's investor funds that ultimately that's going to affect their bottom line.
Absolutely. I remember one of the first things I dropped on your desk. It was a legal bill, and I'm like, I think that my quote, which I probably can't use on camera, was, "Are you effing kidding me?" And it was you, and as you looked at it, you're like, "No way."
Yeah.
And the first thing you're doing is negotiating legal bills, and I think sometimes investors take a lot of this for granted, but we take spending their funds very seriously. If there's an opportunity for us to even question, hey, what's going on here? It's even easier for you, because you can go, come on. Like, I've been down this road before. Like, what are you doing here? Let's not have you cut our teeth on, your newest guy in the office. Let's shave some of this off. And you were able to do that, to the tune of over $10,000 for the first bill. And so the value, now, yes, could I have done that? Absolutely. Have I always? Absolutely. But it's not as easy as you think to get attorneys to cut their bills.
Right. And you're in a more difficult position, because you don't necessarily know, as you look at a legal bill. I've been sending out these bills, for better or worse, for 18, 19 years now. It's nice to not have to do that anymore. Being in-house and focusing on one client, or being part of one organization now in the role that I'm in.
But you know the game.
Yeah, I know the game, and unfortunately, I wouldn't say it's not fair to say the game per se, but there's things where as an attorney with experience, that certain things that even if it took the attorney a lot of time to do it, it shouldn't have taken as much time as maybe they did take or ended up billing us for. So we can go back and then talk to the counsel. And, most attorneys, they're willing to work with us on things like that. And, the important thing, or one of the most important things I've been doing in working with our outside counsel, is making sure that they fully understand that even though, we're a big company, we're growing, we're dealing with a lot of funds, a lot of revenue. At the end of the day, I know the the group of clients that they're working with, and we're still small on the relative scale to compared to some giant corporation, publicly traded company, or
huge
like,
bank, as they try to hone us
more institutional clients. So it's like, if I can let counsel know, make the big bucks off of those big institutional clients. We're really managing investor funds here.
Yes.
And so I'm going to be watching you, basically. And in the particular instance you're describing, I can tell you that the subsequent bills from that attorney came in much more lean.
Reasonable.
Right?
Yes, reasonable.
Right. Because they know that we have an experienced attorney here looking at those bills and scrutinizing them. Yeah. So, again, working with outside counsel, that's just one piece of the puzzle, though, of what I'm working on. But in legal, you never know. Anything could come up on a daily basis.
And it has.
And we have, even just in the couple of months that I've been here, we've been dealing with subpoenas in federal court, in state court, different states.
For different reasons. Some of them unrelated to us.
Administrative.
Most of them are.
Administrative issues. Things relating to maybe, a customer who has something come up on their account, so we have to look and see what's going on. Things where preferred trust, for example, is named as a defendant on a case, really just as a nominal defendant, because at one point we did hold title to some property on behalf of a client that was involved in this later litigation that the client or the customer of ours isn't even any longer involved and doesn't own the property, but we were in the chain of title in the past, and so we get put in as a defendant. And you'd like to pick that up and think, well, that has nothing to do with us or our customer, because we should just ignore it. But if you ignore something like that, then you get a default against you, and it might put you in a bad position if you don't immediately address it the way it needs to be addressed. So
it's crazy. And I don't think investors realize how much of that pops up from time to time.
Right.
Because they really depend on us from the A to Z, right? We originate the loan, we capital raise, we service the loan, we collect on the loan, we take it through foreclosure, all of those things. But those things involve a lot of litigation, a lot of legal issues, a lot of posturing that's happening between parties that have to be tended to. And lucky for them, they don't have to deal with any of that. But the bigger we get and the bigger we got, the more we were having to deal with those situations. So it was becoming extraordinarily time consuming for me to have to deal with, and Pat. So let's turn to defaults for just a second, because you are taking on a role here. Pat Vassar's job as director of underwriting is to go out and find these quality borrowers with quality product. And that's truly his main focus. And when we have situations where a default is involved, it was a good cop, bad cop, where Pat became the bad cop, I had to become the good cop, or vice versa, to keep that borrower in line, to get that project finished, to get it paid off. And again, a lot of behind the scenes that investors aren't quite aware of, but you're a litigator, you're a negotiator.
Right.
And so you are now taking on that role of working with the borrower when there could potentially be a default, or maybe there is a technical default, meaning interest is not paid. You now are the person that is interacting with that borrower. You now are the person that's starting the foreclosure process. You now are the person that is writing the communications that are going to the investors. So talk me through how that process has been, because maybe some of those pieces are new to you, but for the most part, I mean, this is what you do. This is what you've done.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it'd help to give a little bit of background, before I got to Ignite Funding.
Yeah.
But so, I started out here in Las Vegas. I've been in Las Vegas my entire career. Like I said, almost 20 years. I think I graduated in 2006 from the University of Oregon.
Okay.
Go Ducks.
Woohoo!
Right. And the first job I had was as a law clerk to one of the business court judges here in Clark County. And in fact, at the time, we had a specialized business court in Nevada, but it wasn't yet functioning too much. There was only one judge assigned as a business judge at the
Okay.
time. And, Nevada was trying to, and still, I guess we hold ourselves out as the Delaware of the West.
Yes,
meaning
we do.
it's where people want to come. Even if you don't have the business happening here in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
it's a good state to come, incorporate. And one of the things that Delaware has that most states don't, and that Nevada was trying to model, was a specialized business court, where if you have a business dispute, you file it and you get one of the business court judges who has specialized experience, maybe before they went on the bench as being a business lawyer. And with the idea being that Nevada understands that litigation is not good for business,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It slows things down. It drains resources, not just money, but time.
Yeah.
So the idea was we wanted to put a specialized business court in place so that people could file there, go in and get back to what they're doing, what they
Yeah.
want to do in business, right?
Yeah.
So I worked closely with Judge Elizabeth Gonzalez, who was the business court judge at the time, presiding civil judge. She's now retired, but helped her get the rules in place to start a business court. And so even starting from my first job as a law clerk, I was
Yeah.
always doing business law. I wasn't involved in doing all the other random, criminal defense
Yeah.
or civil random things. It was always like business focused. And so for that year, I got to see seasoned business attorneys,
Oh, I
commercial
bet.
litigators that were going to trial, they were in court, and see, what was effective, what was not effective. From the judge's perspective, too, learning, okay, what did this
Yeah.
attorney do, John, that was good or bad, or what should they have
Yeah.
said when I asked this
Yeah.
question? So I got really good mentorship
From the ground
there.
level. Yeah. That's
totally.
really cool.
And then my first job was at a local litigation firm, commercial litigation firm. I was there for a couple of years before I moved to another local business law firm, really business focused,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
And then from there, I went to the firm where you knew me from,
Yeah.
which, again, that was a national firm,
Yeah.
really strong, 1,000 attorneys
Yeah.
from coast to coast,
Yeah.
with offices in every city. So I got to handle all kinds of different matters, from those big institutional clients
Yeah.
to like more local things. But as being a trial attorney, or like focused
Yeah.
on litigation and on bankruptcy law as well, I did a lot of
Yeah.
that, doing workouts and foreclosures,
Yeah.
loan modifications, all
Yeah.
kinds of trustees, receivers, all this kind of stuff where we're dealing with assets and trying to cram loans down creditors' throats and things
Yeah.
things like that.
Yep.
What I've learned along the way is that if you can resolve something through negotiation, it is so much better,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
than going all the way to the final trial and sitting there and being at the mercy of a judge or a jury
Yeah.
who may not understand anything that you're even talking about.
Yeah.
When you spend all that time presenting contracts, presenting all the history, you could just, it's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
It really is. You don't know what you're going to get if you
It
go to
is.
trial.
It
So
is.
as much as we as attorneys always think, oh yeah, well we're going to win. We know that the facts, the law, it's all in our favor, or I can convince the judge, I can convince the
Yeah.
jury, our position is right. We have a just cause. You just can't
you don't
rely
know.
on.
Yeah, you don't know how they're going to rule.
Right. So, but
Interpretation is 9/10 of the law, right?
yeah, and sometimes it could just be something random
Yeah.
that the decision hinges on that you didn't even think was that important.
Yeah.
But it was to that judge for some reason. And sometimes judges are wrong, believe it or not.
I'm
they
sure.
do
I'm sure it
make
happens.
mistakes, and then you have to go to an appeal,
Yeah.
Supreme Court, and that's a more
Whole
lengthy
nother process.
Exactly. So you can eliminate uncertainty on the front end with the
Yeah.
negotiation process. But sometimes you have to litigate in order to
It
get
happens.
to that solution. So sometimes you need to go and fight and litigate and spend time and resources doing that in order to get positioned to be able to resolve
Yes.
something.
That's true. True.
So
And we have cases like that right now that we're involved in.
yeah, and it's not always your decision too whether or not to settle right away. You'd like to settle sometimes, and maybe
Absolutely.
your opponent or the other party on the other side, they're just hell bent on fighting and
Yes.
wasting
Yes.
their clients'
Yes.
funds. So there's a lot of moving pieces, I guess, is what I'm getting at with all this. And so, you have to be sort of a high-level strategist as you go. And I think from my experience working the 3 different firms I've been at and being as involved as I have been in just the minutia of it all, you see that you have to be able to it's a lot of game theory that goes into it.
Oh, sure.
And so, my background before law school was, I have a master's degree in economics. I don't know if you even knew that.
Yeah,
that
I do.
That I taught, Econ 201. And I taught about game theory and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, it's sometimes like a game of chess. So you got to see the moves ahead of the other side and know where things are going so that you can make good decisions now, or position yourself with the decisions you make now so that ultimately you can reach the outcome that you want to try to reach.
And Pat and I were doing that in our own little non-Esquire way.
Yes.
But what we would do and what we were doing and what we'll continue to do is, Pat would take an approach with a borrower and he would go down a path until he hit a dead road, into the road. And then I would take an opposite path with them and see if we got a different resolution. And, most of the time between the two of us, we were able to get things resolved before investors even felt an impact.
Right.
Before there was even a missed interest payment. And I think a lot of people don't realize that behind the scenes that's happening, that negotiation that occurs, is what keeps our portfolio actively working the way that investors expect it to. That's our job.
Yeah.
And so we take that extraordinarily serious, and we're always wanting to make sure that there are no missed interest payments. But there are times when it happens. We have a borrower right now that just MIA. Just couldn't get a hold of, right? You know who I'm talking about.
I've been trying.
And
return my call, please.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, what happened to them? And then you really start thinking, well, geez, something horrible maybe happened,
right?
Because those scenarios can come into play as well, and have in the past. We did have a borrower that passed away, and it took us a while to get a hold of the wife finally. Obviously, she's grieving. She's trying to figure out what's going on. An interest payment is missed. That one all worked out. We were able to get the property back and sell it, not a problem. But it happens. I mean, these things are regularly happening. And if you look at other public company portfolios, you'll see that they're 30, 40, 50, 60% in default. And in those particular cases, they're happy to take back the property. They want to take back the property. They want to go through the scrutiny and the process and whatever. We don't want to do that here. Our goal is not to take back property. Our goal is to try to come to a resolution before we have to foreclose on the property, because the cost, the time frame associated, hiring attorneys, the whole process is quite costly for our investors.
Right.
It really, really is. So now you're in that arena where we're saying, hey, we had a missed payment. Here you go, John. You've got 5 days. We need to either communicate with the clients, or we need to get the interest payment in. And we're okay with a late payment here or there. It happens. Stuff happens. People miss sending the wires on time. Like, those things happen. Again, investors may not know about them because we're resolving them. And on the 15th, they either get an interest payment or they get a communication as to why.
Right.
And now you're that 5-day guy.
Yeah.
You're the guy that we reach out to say, John, I was going to say Houston. John, we have a problem.
Right.
But now you're stepping in and you're acting in that capacity, in that role for us, which is huge, especially with your history. And your negotiation powers and I think resilience. I would use the word resilient when I use your word, when I use your name, because holy cow, he'll get you an answer.
Yeah, and every borrower is different. I'm seeing already, in the as I'm ramping up and getting to know our borrowers, and every situation is different, as you say. It is. But the bottom line is, we always have to keep our investors in mind, and knowing that we can't allow repeated late payments, and if it's
Yeah.
going to be late and we need to foreclose, then that's an arrow
Yeah.
that I have ready
Exactly.
to load up and fire, because just to move things forward. And a lot of times you threaten the foreclosure, and once they know that we're serious, then it's like suddenly that interest payment
Instantly.
comes out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, because with a borrower, even if let's say they're trying to refinance it someplace else, maybe they're trying to go get bank financing at 5% instead of our 12%, which they should be, right? That
Right.
is a
Hopefully.
Yeah, the majority of our exit strategy is that our borrowers are getting bank financing or traditional financing
Right.
after ours. Ours is intended to be short term, so we get all of that. But if we file a notice of default while they're trying to refinance something, it's going to make it very difficult for them to refinance. And so the threat of it alone sometimes is enough, but sometimes you have to actually act on it at the same time. So,
Yeah.
maybe that phone call between the 10th and the 15th to just say, well, here are your options with us. You may want to consider making that interest payment, because otherwise your refinance could potentially be jeopardized. And lo and behold, what do we get? An interest payment,
Yeah.
right? It's not our investors' issue to tend to, because your refinance didn't happen in a timely fashion.
Right.
And so it's stuff like that. It's just that one phone call.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is, as much as we want to work with our borrowers, of course,
Absolutely.
and we want to help them, because a lot of times a little bit of help from a lender can
Yes.
go a long ways to
It
a
can.
borrower. I'm seeing
It
that,
can.
and we all know that just, in dealing with our own banks and issues. Sometimes you need, the person that's holding the gun to your head to
Yeah.
be a little bit understanding, to back off a bit.
Absolutely.
And I get that.
Absolutely.
And so, it's not always in our best interest to just forge ahead and
Yeah.
just be super aggressive, because in like the example you just gave,
Yeah.
if that makes it so that then they can't complete a refinance or something to get this paid off in full, then that's counterproductive. So
Absolutely.
you've got to be smart, and again, you have to look at each situation as a unique situation and decide ultimately what's going to drive the goal
Yes.
the best or the most
Yes.
efficiently, in terms of wanting to get that loan paid off,
Yeah.
get that capital back in our investors' hands,
Yeah.
allow them, if they choose, hopefully to reinvest in a new loan.
Yeah.
So, going straight to the foreclosure immediately, if there's a borrower
Yes.
who in good faith
Yes.
is trying to work things out with us and, and is communicating with us again,
Yes.
but the key
Yeah.
is they've got to communicate with
That's
us.
right.
So
That's
you,
right.
you got to call us back. You got to take my calls,
Yeah.
respond to my emails, even though, if it says chief legal officer, I get maybe that, I get it if that drives people, to just put their head in the sand and, because they've got issues they're trying to deal with. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's usually the situation.
Absolutely.
They don't want to have to face it. But being proactive from the borrower standpoint is going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to be the best thing they can do as well. Because again, we're just trying to help them get the money paid
That's right.
back to our investors.
Ultimately, that's the goal. That is the end goal. And you've had an opportunity. You've been here a few months now. You sat outside of the client service representatives. You've heard them on the phone. You hear what they're dealing with, and we're really looking to kind of ramp up our communication with our clients. Anytime you have a situation where a borrower doesn't make a payment, it can be alarming to investors. It really can.
Yeah.
And makes them pull back, makes them think about who am I working with, what's going on here. From your perspective, when you kind of stepped into Ignite Funding and you looked at a couple of the loans that we have that are in default right now, many of them have resolutions already in place or moving forward. I know you helped negotiate a few of those, most recent ones that we've had over the last couple of months. What's kind of your take on how we kind of manage that whole entire process with our investors, things that we can improve upon? One of the things you had mentioned was communication, because, yes, if investors want to know what I was doing on the weekend, it's reading all of the legal. I mean, some of that stuff is just hundreds of pages long.
Yeah, it can be really dense.
And it's very, very tough. And it has been for me, obviously. I've had time, about 20 years experience, reading all of those things now to pick up on things. But you have to read it all. You can't miss one sentence, because that could be, that could be the difference. But what do you think you're going to bring to an investor from a communication standpoint to make improvements upon what we have been doing?
Yeah, well, there's sort of it should cut down some of the translation errors,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yes.
Being able to communicate exactly what is going on with a pending lawsuit,
Yeah.
and in a way that just simplifies it and puts it into plain English.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times if we're just repeating things from our lawyers that we're all kind of legalese and don't make a lot of sense, and we're passing that on to our investors.
Therefore, if, but,
Yeah, right. Or like
whereas.
yeah, like a bunch of words that sound nice, but what the hell does that mean,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So just trying to translate and explain to them where we're at in the legal process on a couple of these bigger defaults that are unfortunately going to be stuck in litigation land for a little bit, but also trying to communicate forward-looking, because I think prior to me being here, we probably, because again, none of you are lawyers.
Yeah.
Although I think that, if you want to go to law school someday, I'll put in a word for you that maybe you can skip some of the initial classes or something.
Yeah.
But I think since you're not lawyers, you're just going with what the attorneys are giving you, and you're keeping up with them, and you're asking questions, you're giving direction to the lawyers, but you're not going to see the 30,000-foot view and the whole chessboard to know what we
What's
might want to
next.
do and what's coming next.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to focus on, in the last month or the last couple of months that I've done these communications, and I want to be able to give investors, because what investors are worried about is the future, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
what's going to happen?
when we invest, we're
Am I going to get any of this back? That's what they're thinking.
Yeah,
and we know
so
that.
I want them to understand, that we have a plan and where I think it might be going, and then that way, if things evolve differently, which they often do, there's like a starting point where I can explain, we had expected this, but this is what happened instead, and why. Here's why. Because again, it's the uncertainty about the future. I think you touched on that earlier. It's having the uncertainty when you don't know what's happening. That's what really I think is disconcerting, right?
Yeah, it really is.
Because investing is thinking about the future.
Yeah.
A mentor of mine in the investment world 10 years ago, I remember, told me that good investments, or being a good investor, has to do with you basically putting your money where you think the future is going to be.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to imagine what the future is going to look like, what a certain project might do because it turn out a certain way. And so you're betting on the future.
Absolutely.
So it's the future that you believe in that you're betting on. So being able to explain as much as possible what we expect to come in the future, even though, I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But
I call it a snow globe.
Yeah, no snow globes. But I at least have, the tools that I need to be able to, try to conjure up what's going to happen down the road here.
No, totally makes sense. All right. Anything else? Any other fun little tidbits about John we should know, kind of moving into the next year, that you're going to kind of bring to the table for us?
Well, I don't know. Right now, I'm working on the November with the Ignite funding. I guess it's a time-honored tradition here.
Yes, it is.
That no shave November.
Yes.
So you might see a more hairy John by the end of this month, but then a more clean shaven after that.
Okay. We're going to keep the top nice and smooth.
Nice and clean at all times.
I'm
up top.
wondering how many at first thought, oh, is that Pat? No, we just have two very handsome bald men now that work at Ignite Funding.
I mean, I think investors should feel good about that. I mean, more power balds is never a bad thing.
This is true. But no, in all honesty, it is a blessing for us to actually have legal counsel at this point. And I hope investors find that to be a reward, honestly, for them, because remember, investors don't pay anything to invest with us. So we are utilizing our revenue to put that into creating a better structure here at Ignite Funding for investors when it comes to dealing with any legal issues that come up, or foreclosures or negotiations with borrowers, that we are now putting more effort into that initiative and making sure that we minimize that as much as we possibly can, and keep their capital as preserved as we possibly can, and get the return of their capital when we have foreclosures. Try to speed that process up as much as possible.
Right.
And it's difficult, but having somebody that's focused on that really, I'm hoping is going to shorten that time frame or condense that as much as possible.
Yeah, and to give you a serious answer to your question about what to expect in the future, besides just my, my good looks continuing, is, I think that that's the biggest focus that I'm trying to hone in on is the defaults, and the communications on those defaults, but also just the process time. I think we've already been processing them very quickly. But when you have someone whose top priority is the defaults, and doesn't have to stop other daily activities to hone in on them, maybe it goes from 5 days to be able to get a ballot in front of an investor to 1 day or 2 days on a certain issue. But also, I think on negotiating exits on those defaults, being focused on that full time is going to cut down the overall turnaround time from the moment a loan goes into default to when we have the full resolution, even if it's through foreclosure or through a short sale that gets approved or something like that. Because time is money, and so every day that loan sits in default is just another day that the investors don't have the capital returned so that they can do something else with it. So I think shortening the turnaround time as much as possible on a default from start to finish, that's a big that's something we can look forward to, hopefully. And then for example, just settling a case, sometimes it just takes a lot of hand-holding of your outside counsel when you have it. Persistence and resilience with the other side,
and being present. That's a big part of it too.
Totally.
I mean, instead of hearing it third hand, we're able to actually be there and present for these things when appropriate. But I certainly did not have the time to fly out for all and listen to and be at the mediations and all the components that went along with it. Would I have liked to? Sure, but I also need to run companies at the same time. So that's a huge part of it.
You have outside counsel who are on it as well, always. True. But having me here will cut down, and I think already has cut down on the need of how much time outside counsel has to spend, or whether we need outside counsel at all, or at what point we need to engage outside counsel. So handling things proactively before we have to go out and retain a law firm, whereas before I'm sure, we got to a certain point you needed to just get counsel involved because otherwise,
it wasn't going anywhere.
But settling a case as soon as possible when it's a case that should be settled, that's going to improve.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we just settled one recently that had we gotten better advice from our outside attorney early on, we could have made hard decisions earlier than we eventually did make those decisions. So again, cutting down on the time frame of getting that capital back in the hands of our investors, that's a main goal that I have.
And we've talked about defaults a lot, but here's the reality. We actually don't have that many.
Relatively speaking.
There's a whole other side of your role that we didn't talk about, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. Okay. And it's really the protections that we're putting in place so that if we had a default situation, how are we able to navigate it more swiftly, quickly, et cetera? And it goes to, title policies. Do we have everything that we need in there for those title policies? Are we, actively looking at our loan documentation, making modifications when we go into a judicial area that has potential non-judicial clauses that could be put into place? Are we putting them in place? I mean, there's so many more ahead of the curve that we are, really focused on and having you focus on to make sure that we're in preparation of something that could be later on a big issue.
Right.
And as we're navigating all of these different states, because diversification is hugely important to us, but we want to make sure that we're entering the right states, that when we're allowed to from a commercial lending standpoint, that we're looking at, if there is potential any issues from a security standpoint, looking at can we market in those particular areas? Should we be in those particular areas? There's much more to this story. We don't have tons and tons and tons of time to talk about it, but a lot of energy is being placed on that as well. And not just the states we're in, but any potential future states we may want to go in. Looking at this more from a strategic standpoint, hey, knucklehead Pat and Carrie, why have you guys not looked at this state? This is prime for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we take some market data and we put that together and we go, yeah, where are we in that state? So I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to come.
Yeah.
And when we enter into a state, there's a lot of research that's being done to make sure that we're in the right state and that we're not adding additional risk because we're about mitigating that risk, obviously, keeping our defaults as low as we possibly can. That's a whole nother side of the fence that you will and have started working on as well. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not, but it's a machine, and it's a machine that we need to poke and prod and make sure we have everything in place for the future success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking into every avenue of potential revenue for the company is important. And we've talked a lot about kind of the cleanup of the few loans that have had problems. But there's a lot more that don't have problems. And there's also just the piece where we're always, again, talking about the future, thinking about the future of the company, future opportunities that we want to bring to our investors. And as we do that, having me here in-house, I think is going to be valuable because I'll be able to look at things from a legal perspective at the front end. Yeah. And, as the old adage goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
That's right.
So having eyes legally on everything on the front end will prevent us from maybe getting into a situation where we feel some pain at the end, right?
Absolutely.
So that's something that I have been looking at, will continue to look at. You've already put me on a couple of different states and, I figured out what the different rules are. And that's an interesting thing about, the practice of law, right? Is in this country. Anyway, you have 50 states. Each one has its own regulator, has different divisions. They're not the same. Some have, in Nevada here, we're, of course, regulated by the mortgage lending division. Yeah. Not every state has a mortgage lending division. They might have some other financial division that would potentially implicate regulate us if we were to go into that state.
And how much, and what exemptions,
and under what
going.
Circumstances. Yeah. And so, before we originate a loan in any particular state, we really need to know what does it look like for that state, or what are the things that we have to comply with so that we can do everything properly, efficiently, and assess whether or not it's going to be ripe for a positive return.
Yeah, absolutely. And really looking beyond what we offer now. I mean, we're offering collateralized real estate investment opportunities, but we also have to look into the future. And, as we bring in a younger generation of investors, a lot of them don't want to fill out the paperwork on every single loan. A lot of them don't want to complete an SBOA. A lot of them don't want to talk to us. A lot of them, and so that evolution is something that we also have to take to heart. And we have to realize that in order for us to grow for the next 20 years, that we're likely going to have to start offering fund opportunities where we're syndicating our investments. Now that everybody knows us, knows the people behind the scenes, which I think is the biggest due diligence that is missed in syndications, is really looking at who are the people that are putting these investments together and what is their track record. Will they be around for another 5 years? Or, is it a 70-year-old individual at the helm? I mean, those are things you have to look into. And it is something that we're also looking into, that another reason why we have you here is there's so many, but another reason why we have you here is because we are looking at a potential fund opportunity or syndication with Ignite Funding. And so we want to keep evolving, and that evolution does take us into some uncharted territory that we need to have legal advice on. And so that's something that you're also working on for us. So we do definitely appreciate that, and brings a whole nother perspective to what we do. And, for 20 years, we're focused all of our attention on collateralized real estate investing. And, we're starting to maybe change our tune a little bit on that. Still offering it, obviously. We're not going to leave that behind, but we have to be strategic. The younger generation expects different things.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a click generation, right? You want to be on your computer, click the mouse, and make things easy. So as much as we can streamline processes for potential investors and for current investors, and bring things up to date to this digital age that we're part of, that's important,
Yeah.
and we have to evolve as a company, because if not, we're doing a disservice to our investors, those
Absolutely.
that might want to look
Yeah.
at different types of products. And just, again, it's diversification
Yeah.
as much as anything.
Yeah.
Having different potential offerings or things that our customers can invest in. And have to, of course, before we do anything like that, it
Yeah.
has to be compliant. It has to
Absolutely.
be done
Absolutely.
correctly, because we're in a very highly regulated industry. We have the trust of our customers,
Yeah.
our investors, and we, of course, will continue to earn and deserve that trust.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is through doing things the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think there's any better line to leave that on. And I appreciate you joining me today. I hope the investors have enjoyed getting to know John a little bit better. He's around for the long haul. We're not letting him go. He's got a lot of work to do, both to protect us in the future and now. But we're happy to have him on our team. And we hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Deeds in the Desert, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us this week on Deeds in the Desert, where short-term investments meet long-term investors. We hope you enjoyed the content so much that you share it with all your friends. Who doesn't like learning about passive fixed income, right? Still hungry for more education? Visit our website at ignitefunding.com. Or if you're ready to take the leap and start investing, give us a call at 702-761-0000 and schedule a free investor consultation.